Hey everyone, it's Janine Hubble-Cox with It's All Legal Too. And we're back again today with The Whole Truth. We're doing a two-part series to our discussion on Wednesday with Malcolm X Larvadan. We talked about why your vote counts. And I decided to do just another follow-up discussion after speaking to this phenomenal young woman yesterday for the first time. Her name is Akyla Tomlinson. She is an accountant with a Big Four accounting firm, and she's also in preparation to take the LSAT, which is the examination that's required to enter into law school. But she's also a social and justice activist. And while we were talking yesterday, we started talking about the voting process, how the younger generation basically is just not, I don't know if motivated is the right word, but they're just not inclined to vote in this election. And this is not the first time that I'm hearing this. And so I thought, you know what, we need to tackle this topic. We touched on this topic on Wednesday with Malcolm, but, this is an important topic with so many important voting deadlines coming up. And not to say that there's an election that's only 30 something days away. So with that being said, I'm going to bring in Akilah. Uh-oh, here she is.
Hi. Hi, thank you, Janine, for having me on.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Oh, and just let me say that Akilah received her undergrad degree from
Canisius College.
Canisius College. I'm sorry.
Yes, I did. It's okay.
So welcome to The Whole Truth, and It's All Legal Too. And again, it's so nice to meet you. I know we had our very first discussion yesterday, but I was just so in awe and inspired, by what we were talking about. I'm like, no, you have to come onto this platform, and we can try to tackle this topic about or the continuation of the topic about why your vote counts, and
absolutely,
why so many individuals of the younger generation, so to speak, are not registering to vote. They are saying that they're not going to vote. Right. And I just want to tackle this topic because I made a post on my Facebook and Instagram pages a few days ago. Basically, I was reposting from the NAACP that said that 18 to 34-year-olds are going to comprise 40% of the eligible voters for this election.
Yep. In 2019, the Millennial Generation became the largest voting demographic, in this country. So absolutely, we're definitely going to have a lot of political power. And I do think that the best way to encourage and to let people, and motivate people to get out there and vote is through, honestly, inspiration and education, and letting them know that, elections do have consequences. And so because we have the power to decide the quality of life that we want for ourselves and future generations, voting is a way that we can stand up for the issues that we care about on the federal, state, and especially the local levels, because on your local level, that's like the most important election. And speaking for myself and speaking for all millennials, the things that we do care about are affordable college. A lot of us have student loan debt that we can't even imagine paying off in this lifetime. We care about allocating necessary funding to the Black and Brown communities to improve our schools and our healthcare system. We care about protecting minority rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights. And, and I think all of that is very much encompassed in, making sure that we're motivating and we're educating and we're inspiring millennials to vote. Because, ultimately, when you don't vote, it's like you're giving up your voice, And I think that a lot of people in my generation think that the most effective way and the only way to get things done or to at least move the needle is through protesting. And like pounding in the streets. And I'm not discounting that that's not effective, because it definitely is. It definitely puts pressure on legislators. But when you think about it, Brianna Taylor, she died on March 13th. And we've been protesting since then and demanding justice for her. So March, April, May, June, July, August, September, the Attorney General came out and said, we are not bringing charges against the people that killed her, against the police officers that killed her. And when you look at the state attorney general is put in that position by the governor. And we have the power to elect the governor. And, you know, the same thing goes for the mayor. We have the power to elect the mayor, who decides who the police chief is in the city. And then exactly. And then the mayor also has the power to determine how the city budget gets allocated. You know, I'm in New York City, and Mayor de Blasio decided to only cut $1 billion of funding from the $6 billion NYPD budget. And it's things like that that we need to be very mindful of and pay attention to, because if we vote, we can essentially determine the outcome of these situations. And like the same thing with, you know, city council members. We also vote for city council members that introduce legislation and propose legislation that affect our city life, you know? And the same thing with like the list goes on, the same thing with judges, the same thing with district attorneys who decide what cases to prosecute. Exactly. So it's like, you know, voting is very much important. I think people don't understand that process, or they don't see my mom always says, you know, people don't see the forest for all the trees that are in it. And I think because people don't see direct change, like immediate change, that they think voting is not going to matter. And so
and that's what we discussed on Wednesday.
Exactly.
Like, you know, yeah, you may not see immediate changes with your vote, but you know, when you vote and when you're out there demanding change, you may not see it in your lifetime. You're doing it for your children, for your grandchildren, you know, who are growing up in this, you know, in this world that we live, this crazy, crazy world that we live in. And I just want to back up just real quick about the comment that you made about the Brianna Taylor case. I mean, charges were brought against one of the officers, but it wasn't directly involved with the death of Brianna Taylor. And now that one of the grand jurors actually filed a motion to have
I saw that. Yeah.
Have the grand jury proceedings released to the public. And I believe that happened today. I'm sorry, it's just been a crazy day, but I believe that happened.
I heard it happened today as well. And apparently this was like the first time, you know, something like this has ever happened. And the juror is very much motivated to make sure this information gets out, because apparently they weren't presented with all the facts and all the information to determine the charges of this case.
Right. I think the grand juror, and not to get off topic, but I mean, it's all interrelated. I believe the grand juror that filed the motion said that the option to indict the other two officers was not even presented by Daniel Cameron, who is the Attorney General of Kentucky, who basically presided over the case.
Yes, and you have to wonder why that is, you know, and we could exactly, because we could go on and on and on. Like everybody knows how, you know, shady politics can be. Everybody knows how corrupt politics can be, and like we have the power to change that. And you know, I'm always gonna go back to that narrative. Because, you know, at 18 years old, my mom made sure that me, my brother, and my sister were signed up to vote as soon as we turned 18 years old, because of being an immigrant, because she's originally from Jamaica. And and she came to this country, and she did not get her green card I think she got her green card like 2 or 3 years ago. And so she's been in this country undocumented for over 20 years. And one of the things that she very much enjoys participating in politics, and she's even campaigning in upstate New York with a senator. And she's like, you know, the one thing I wish I could do in this country is vote, because it's so important. And she says this all the time, that so many undocumented immigrants that live in this country wishes they had the opportunity to vote. And it's like, how knowing that and understanding that, it's for me, speaking for myself, it's hard for me to take something like that for granted, you know, because it's a right that we have in this country, a right that many people wish they had. Because when you don't vote, you know, people feel like they don't have a voice.
Well, voting is your voice. And I just want to touch on that topic. I mean, my dad used to take me to the voting booth with him. And that's how I learned the importance of voting. He made sure that when I was 18 that I was registered to vote. He did the same thing for my sister. So, you know, as parents, for those of us who have children, it's
Mhm.
incumbent on us. It's our
Absolutely.
responsibility to make sure that our children are aware of the voting process and know the
Mhm.
importance of voting and making sure that they are registered to vote when they turn
Absolutely.
18. That's on us.
Mhm.
That's
Absolutely.
on
And
us.
I definitely agree with that. And I was even before this segment, I was even talking to my mom, and we got to a point in our conversation. I'm like, Mom, do you want to do this? Because she's so passionate about, making sure people, especially people in my generation, are out there and voting. She told me that 60 right now in New York State, all 63 seats in the Senate are up for re-election next year. Next year, all 63 seats in the Senate are up for re-election. And it kind of like begs the question on why so much legislation has kind of been put on hold. So especially like the less is more legislation that I'm actually working on with the League of Women Voters.
Okay.
One of the legislation that we're working on passing is the less is more legislation that won't it will not arrest people for technical parole violations, because right now people are being reincarcerated at a higher rate for those technical parole violations than they're arresting people for everyday crimes that are committed. And that's something that we have been working very diligently to get rid of, because missing an appointment can automatically get you arrested and thrown back in jail. And
Right.
so nobody will touch, like, the less is more legislation has been put on on hold, because no legislator wants to touch that bill, because they don't want to risk losing their seat come election year. And it kind of begs the question as to like why are basic rights like this, like someone being treated fairly, like why is that kind of open the door to you wanted to take a step back and say, I don't want to touch this because
What's
it's
that?
to compromise my seat on like in and is going to compromise my Senate seat. And I just think the
You have
whole
some politicians that are willing to do that, though. And I mean,
absolutely.
that's the sad part about it.
Mm-hmm. It is.
You have politicians that are in politics for all the wrong reasons. And I
Right.
mean,
Exactly.
we see it all the time, when we
Mm-hmm.
watch the news, especially, I'm not going to go there today, but I mean, some politicians are in politics for the wrong reasons. They don't
Absolutely.
have any genuine interest on making a change
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
doing what's right for the constituents or for their country. I mean,
Absolutely.
and that's just the bottom line. And it
Mm-hmm.
starts from the bottom, like you said, with your local,
Mm-hmm.
politicians, all the way up to the top.
Absolutely. And I think that, especially with my generation, one of the things that we have to recognize is that the baby boomer population will not, like, they're not going to be in the majority for very much longer. It's going to be our generation. So it's going to be up to us to make sure that that shift in politics happens for all the right reasons. And it happens for those reasons that we can, leave behind a good legacy for the generations that are coming up behind us. And I think that one of the most important things that I do want to emphasize is our political power, if we show up to the voting booths, can be very much polarizing, and we can make sure that the people that we elect and we put into power, don't strip, like the Roe v. Wade, that's something else that has come up, in the Supreme Court. And, if Donald Trump was not the president, that's not something that we would have to worry about, because his conservative views are very much putting women at risk because of this Roe v. Wade decision that, the Supreme Court wants to get rid of.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to pay attention to
Mm-hmm.
basically who is running for what.
Exactly.
You have to do your research. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everybody does not have your interests at heart. And I mean, I don't mean like yourself, because
Mm-hmm.
most of the time you're not going to see any direct benefit, like as an individual.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Absolutely.
From politics. And I mean, that's just how it is.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see the changes in your community, in your city, in your state,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
federally. And so while we're on that topic, I want to know, you're 27 years old.
I am.
How did you become interested in politics? You know,
Oh, in general,
as an accounting major.
I know accounting is I surprised myself, honestly. Politics, because I do realize the impact that legislation, like especially the criminal justice system, my family being involved or being victims of the criminal justice system in this country is what sparked my interest in wanting to change the system. And so naturally, I just fell into politics because of that. I grew up in a home with a single parent because my father was deported when I was 6 or 7 years old. And he was deported on, a juvenile sealed record, which was not allowed at the time, but for some reason the judge was able to get away with it. And he was deported and sent back to Jamaica. And my mom was stuck raising 3 kids on her own. And so I grew up in a home that always paid attention to politics. My mom was always very much, even though she couldn't participate, as a United States citizen, she was always very well informed in the political landscape. And then also my sister Niambe, she worked on Capitol Hill for Senator Kristen Gillibrand, and she now works as the Diversity and Inclusion Communications Director. And so politics is just very much a part of my family. And I think that the more I get involved in wanting to make sure that we change, this, like the policies in this country, the legislation in this country, like I am just very much interested and invested in, becoming politically involved and making sure I stay that way, because I think I owe it to my family, I owe it to the children that I'm going to have someday. And I owe it to the kids that look up to me, so I think that like my interest in politics doesn't even it's not like my interest in politics comes out of my concern for the people that I love and the people that I care about.
Exactly. And then that's how I have an 18-year-old son. And, throughout this pandemic, we have seen, repeatedly month after month, what has happened as a result of police violence, as a result of, white supremacy or whatever. I'm trying to make a change and make a difference so that my son doesn't have to worry about it. My son can go jog if he wants to. My son can go to place and sleep in peace without, being in fear of losing his life, walking down the street or driving or whatever it is. So I wanted to narrow in our discussion about, you were telling me yesterday about how so many in your age bracket, so to speak, are saying that they are not registered to vote and they have no intent on voting. And what are the reasons that they're giving you for this? Because honestly, like I said, I've been hearing it too. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and I'm seeing posts about the same thing.
Yeah, it's just honestly people my age, we are the type of people, at least the majority of people that I know, we're the type of people, like, we need to see it in order to believe it. Because we hear all these campaign promises that, sound good and do appeal to us, but it's like you get elected and we help you get elected, and it's like we don't see any of these things, come true. And I think just people in my age bracket and just my generation, we're tired of empty promises, and we're tired of bearing the burden of, not being able to afford school or living, at home with our parents. Because a lot of us, are in so much debt, student loan debt, that like we can't even afford to move out of our, parents' houses. And people aren't registered to vote because, for one, they don't think it will make a difference. At least the people that I've talked to, they don't think it'll make a difference. They think that, okay, I voted, so now what? Like, what's going to change? What's going to happen? And they're not sold on the empty promises that a lot of politicians are saying in the news, on social media. They're not for it. And the only thing I can do is make
Yeah.
sure that the only thing that I can do is to make sure that I'm having an honest conversation with my peer group
Right.
and letting them know that your vote does matter.
Does
You know,
matter.
your vote. And I don't even like expressing that to them and getting them to believe that are two completely different things.
Well, yeah, and I
And so,
think that that's the line that we're at. That's the
mhm,
point where we're at. Well, what
right.
is it going to take to make them
Mhm.
actually believe it?
Right. It's going to change. It's going to take actual changes happening. And that's why I always advocate for making sure you're very heavily involved in your local election, because they see the presidential election and they're like, okay, like I'm still, living in the projects, or I'm still, sleeping on my mom's couch, or I'm still in debt, or I can't buy
Right.
a house. I'm still in the president, like what vote, if I voted, how would that have changed? Like my circumstances are not changing because these different people are sitting in the presidential seat. So that's why I'm someone that definitely always advocates for making sure you're heavily involved in your local elections, because
Right.
that is where you're going to see the most change, and that is where your vote will have the most impact.
So do you think that politicians actually talking to your peers would help,
Yeah.
or no?
I do. I do think politicians need to be more engaged in my generation, because we very much feel like the forgotten generation. We feel like, politicians don't think, like, because politicians know that our generation or our demographic have lower voter turnouts, then they
Right.
don't pay attention to us because they just think we're not going to vote anyways. And they think we're lazy when that's not even the case. We just don't believe anything you're saying because you're not having an honest conversation with us, you know?
So,
And
I
I think
mean,
that's the biggest thing
how
they
could they
can.
reach you guys though? I mean, you say have an honest conversation, become more involved. What avenues could they take to
Oh,
do that?
they need to come to us. So a lot of us right now are protesting in the streets. They need to come to us in the streets and talk to
Okay.
us. A lot of us are, like me, for example, a lot of us are very much involved in grassroots effort campaigns. They need to come down to these organizations and have a conversation with us, and open the floor and have a
Right.
forum and an open discussion and ask us what we want and what we want to see. Nobody is doing that. Nobody cares to do that. None of these politicians, none of these legislators care to do any of those things, which is why we very much.
Has anybody tried to invite them down? I mean, not that a protest is something that you need to invite a politician down
Right.
to, but it would seem to me,
Mhm.
if
Oh,
I'm
absolutely. So at least in New York City, being a part of the League of Women Voters, one of the elected officials, one of the city council members, Brian Benjamin, is very much involved in trying to understand and work with our organization on how we can change the criminal justice system in New York City. So he's someone that we have worked personally with to, enact legislation and propose legislation, and then the League of Women Voters supports that legislation, you know, that gets introduced to city council. And so I think the biggest thing is we need to start getting these grassroots organizations and these not-for-profit organizations that are very much on the ground and on the front lines and know what
right.
needs to, and live in these communities. Like there needs to be a one-on-one or an open forum with these elected officials. Because when you're campaigning, like a lot of city council, because every election year, like city council members, they like go to their districts and focus on their districts and say, hey, vote for me. This is what I'll do for you guys. Hey, vote for me. This way. And then once we elect them, it's kind of like, where'd you go? Like,
Right.
so I think once we elect these, officials or these legislative officials into their positions, they need to come back and make
Back.
sure that they're being held accountable for the things that they said that they would do.
So you're saying basically don't have the town hall meetings when you're campaigning and running for, whatever position that you're running for. Be sure to have these town hall meetings after you're elected.
Honestly, I think they should be had before and after. I think there needs to be constant dialogue between these city, because we're the constituents, so I don't want to have to call, your office line and then get your staff member to take a message and then you just read the
Right.
message and it goes, you know what I mean? Like there needs to be a face there, like you
Yes.
need to, all that effort you put into campaigning, you need to continuously put in that effort after your campaign as well. And I think that is the biggest disconnect, at least that I see. That's one of the biggest disconnects I see, is that we help get you elected, but then we don't see any effort
After the election.
Exactly. We don't see you after the election. Like, come back to us. Like, come back. And we have all these ideas, you know, on things that can be improved in the community. Like, we live in these communities. Like, we're living, sleeping, breathing, doing everything in these communities. Like, we're the ones that, you know, are disenfranchised, especially like I'm living in Harlem right now, and simple things like the park, they put park locks, they put locks on the gate so kids can't go into the park and play basketball. And it's like, why are you doing that? Like the one thing like people do not want to lose is their sanity, especially during a pandemic. And the one thing that will help people with mentally is exercising and making sure they can at least spend and hang out with their friends, and they can do that at the park, playing basketball, playing tennis, you know, doing whatever. And it's like, why are you putting locks on the park, on the gates to do that, to the point where people literally use, I don't know, what is that tool called? They use like that tool and then they cut up in the lock and they sneak into the park and then we get in trouble. Yeah. And it's like, you know, like why exactly, like why is this happening? Why are you doing this? Because then, and this is happening in Harlem, but I go to the Lower East Side, there's no locks on
There's no lock, there are no locks
on the gates. Like, what's going on? And you know, that definitely has something to do with the demographic of people.
With the demographics.
In Harlem, like obviously Harlem is a very much, you know, a soulful Black African American community. And we're the ones that can't go into the park. Like, we're the ones that need the park, you know, to escape whatever is happening. In our homes. Yeah, I think it's, yeah.
So what, I mean, is there, I mean, I know that voting deadline registrations, registration deadlines for voting are approaching quickly. I know in Texas, it's Monday. I don't know about New York.
In New York, let me add my, I think it's,
I mean, I'm like, is there anything, I mean, over the next few days that I mean, I know this is like, you know,
that we can
11th hour that can be done to try to, you know, get some of your peers of the, you know, millennials, you know, out there, you know, get them registered so that they can vote.
I just, honestly, I have been doing, me personally, I have been texting all my friends like, hey, are you registered to vote? Are you registered to vote? Make sure you text your friends and ask them if they're registered to vote, and then going on social media, please vote, register to vote. And then I go, whenever I'm outside and I, you know, I'm very active, so play basketball, tennis, whatever. Whenever I'm in the park and I see people, I'm like, hey, are you registered to vote? You're not registered, you should register to vote. They're like, why am I voting? Because like this election is very important. You know, you have the power to determine the fate of this country and the generations to come. Like, let them know. So I'm doing it by word of mouth, and I encourage people to do the same thing. Because we are definitely, like you said, on the 11th hour and at a point where like it's crunch time. It's kind of like a fire drill. Like, we need people to just sign up and register to vote. And then also changing the way we vote is going to be, we should have a whole different discussion on that, because everyone's on the phone.
Well, I mean, and there are big changes that are going on here in Texas. You know, just real quick, the governor issued a proclamation yesterday that basically forced the county clerks for each county to have mail-in, drop-off mail ballot locations at one place, only one location for each county. So I'm in Houston. Well, right outside of Houston, but there are 2.4 million residents in the Houston area for Harris County. They have designated one place to drop off mail-in ballots, which is literally insane. So you want to talk about attempted voter suppression and disenfranchisement? There you go.
And there you go, right there. Exactly. And southern states are the worst states when it comes to voter suppression. You know, and I just even remember the race, the Georgia race, the governor race in Georgia between Brian Kemp and Stacey Abrams. I'm like, that is the worst like example of voter suppression. It's like, how do you elect a farm boy over a Yale law school graduate with experience, and like, does not make sense.
I know a lot of stuff about politics doesn't make sense, but I mean, people have to be aware of what's going on, and be very, very aware of what's going on, especially during this pandemic. The way we vote has changed dramatically than what we're used to, and like I said, with governors now implementing BS procedures, so to speak. I mean, it's going to cause more harm than it is, going to be of benefit for those that are going to be casting their ballots by, dropping off the mail-in ballots at locations or, whatever. So just be cognizant, everybody, of what's going on. Please check your state's voting deadlines and your state's early voting start and end dates as well. You can Google. I always say Google's a beautiful tool.
Right, Google's your best friend.
Yeah. Google, to see what your state's voting deadlines are. I mean, because those are imperative. You can early vote. Please get out there and do it.
Absolutely. And I second everything Janine is saying. Go out there and vote. Make sure you know your state's voting registration deadline, and be proactive and take it seriously. Because it's important.
Well, I mean, we're really, really, really in a time that I never thought that I would see.
I am with you there. I'm with you on that.
I don't think any of us could. So it's just incumbent on all of us to do our part, to try to make, this country a better place to live in. Because right now, it's just like, I don't believe. I feel like I'm in the twilight zone right now with everything that's going on.
Absolutely. And social media only exacerbates all of that. It literally exacerbates all of that. So making sure you're filtering, the factual information from the BS that's out there is also just very important. And making sure you're aware and doing your homework and educating yourself. It's also important.
Don't always rely on what somebody else says or what you see. Fact check.
Yeah, absolutely. Every single time. Every single time. And I even have to be careful of that myself. Like, I make sure I'm reading more than one article, and make sure I'm consulting with people that I know in the field that are well versed on these subjects. So I'm getting the right information, and it's being backed by people who are experts in the field. So yeah, I just implore and encourage everyone to do the same thing.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and talk about this, because like I said, this is so important. Like I said, 40% of eligible voters, I mean, that's basically a little less than half, 18 to 34-year-olds. I mean, we cannot take that for granted at all. So if you're not registered, if you're watching this, please share. Please make sure, if you're a parent, that your children are registered to vote, your grandchildren are registered to vote. If you are in that age bracket, please talk to your friends. If you are registered, encourage them to register and go vote. I mean, this election is of critical importance all across the board, because like I said, it starts from the bottom all the way down to the top. So your local elections, your state elections, all of that. Research who you're voting for.
Absolutely.
And just cast your vote. Please do.
Yes, please cast your vote.
Well, Akilah, thank you so much for coming on this Friday evening.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
But like I said, I mean,
I'm just studying.
It's like, this is a perfect follow-up from my discussion on Tuesday. So like I said, it's crunch time, and whatever I can do to try to get the word out about the importance of voting and why everyone's vote counts, that's what I'm going to try to do. So I again thank you for coming on to my platform. I wish you all the best. We will be in touch because I know you are an aspiring a lawyer to be, and whatever assistance that I can give you, that's what I'm here to do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here and being very supportive.
No, you're welcome. I appreciate you as well. So, and I want to shout out to Jesse Daniels for making that connection.
He definitely made possible.
Yes, it was absolutely. So Jesse's interview is coming out soon on Sister to Sister,
Ooh.
or Jamie Foster Brown. So yeah. So again, I wish you nothing but the best. I'm here for
Thank you.
to give you whatever guidance I can from a lawyer's perspective, and just keep doing what you're doing to try to make a change.
I will.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys for tuning in this evening. This will replay, so please share. Be sure to follow us right here on Facebook at It's All Legal Too, as well as on Instagram at It's All Legal Too. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel, where I will have all of my interviews logged in soon, I hope. And that's going to my YouTube channel is It's All Legal Too. So you guys, please, stay tuned for more upcoming interviews that address social injustice issues as well as legal issues, and just trying to make a change in this crazy world we live in. So again,
amen.
Stay safe. Akilah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.